There is a kind of exhaustion that's utterly silent. Not from lack of sleep, but from waking up every morning, carrying the weight of other people's expectations, the pressure to appear okay, and the subtle guilt of not being happy enough. The harder you try to feel good, the more hollow you become. Have you ever felt like that? Smiling in meetings, answering "I'm good" when someone asks, while deep down, nothing feels good at all. We live in a strange era, one where people have 1,000 tools for instant gratification, yet have lost the ability to truly feel happiness. Social media floods every moment with standards of must have, must achieve, must be more, tricking many into believing that happiness is a luxury reserved only for the lucky few. But over 2,000 years ago, people who had no smartphones, no weekends, no dopamine from likes discovered something profound. Happiness doesn't come from circumstances. It comes from the ability to master oneself. From knowing who you are, what you want, what must be accepted, and what can be trained. In this video, we'll walk together on a path that isn't glamorous but grounded. 5 Stoic principles that teach you not to wait for happiness to knock, but to open that door from within. Not to chase a lighter life, but to build a stronger self, one that can stand firm through any storm. 1. Master the morning, when dawn becomes an inner battlefield. Some people go their entire lives without ever asking, "How do my mornings begin?" They simply open their eyes, get up, and reach for their phone out of reflex. The first light doesn't come from the sun, but from the screen. The first thought doesn't come from within, but from notifications. The first feeling isn't aliveness, but being pulled into something loud, full, yet hollow. And the most dangerous part is they think that's normal. They call it a routine. But if there is a fracture between a person and their inner self, it starts here. The moment we let the outside world program our inner state before we're even aware of what we're living for. The morning is supposed to be the purest space of life, when the mind has not yet been swayed by the crowd, when emotions are still unshaken, when the body hasn't been stretched by demands. Yet most people allow that sacred time to be stolen by noise, triviality, and things unworthy of carrying into a meaningful day. You might be brilliant, disciplined, even accomplished. But if your morning begins in a daze, you've already handed the wheel to the currents of life rather than taking it with clarity. A meaningful day doesn't begin with what you do, but with where your mind is anchored. And if the starting point is misaligned, the rest of your day will merely be attempts to fix a trajectory that was wrong from the beginning. The Stoics never saw mornings as just a time to recharge after sleep. They saw it as the first battleground, a place where the mind must be positioned before the world rushes in. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in solitude, "When you wake up, remind yourself you will meet people who are irrational, selfish, deceitful." Not to breed fear, but to remind himself that calm doesn't come from life being predictable, it comes from being mentally prepared. For him, the morning was a ritual, no incense, no gods, just a man facing himself and recentering for the day ahead. A morning led by unconscious habit is like a ship that sets sail already off course. At first, it's only a few degrees, but go far enough, and you end up somewhere completely different from where you were meant to go. And the tragedy is you still move, still strive, still hustle, just in the wrong direction. That's why some people feel lost after years of effort. Not because they're lazy, but because each day starts with being pulled, not with being directed. You cannot live consciously if every morning begins unconsciously. You cannot speak of mastering life if each day starts with the world deciding your mood, your attention, and your attitude. You can't win at life when you step into it like a groggy soldier, unaware of the battle, unaware of the cause. And so, you don't live, you react. You don't choose, you cope. You don't build, you chase. It all starts with something that seems small, a morning stolen by a lack of awareness. But from that small place, you can begin again. Because someone who masters the first moment has more than a chance to master everything that follows. If an unconscious morning can derail an entire life of awareness, then it is also in the morning that you have the chance to recalibrate your spiritual compass once more. And this time, instead of being dragged by life, you'll take the wheel. No need for noise, no declarations, just one intentional moment of silence where you ask yourself, where will I direct my mind today? We cannot stop the world from influencing us, but we can choose to reprogram our inner direction while the mind is still soft and clear right at the moment we wake. Like moist soil at dawn. If you don't sow seeds of calm in time, weeds of anxiety and chaos will take root without needing an invitation. The world doesn't need your permission to invade your mind, it only needs your absence from yourself. This is why seasoned souls never begin the morning with haste. They enter the new day like a ceremony. No ornament, no religion, but with reverence. Because they know how you begin a day is how you begin yourself again. A cup of tea poured slowly, a breath held longer than usual. A blank page waiting to be written with an old question that never runs out of meaning. How will I live today? The Stoic doesn't seek calm. He prepares for a day that may not be calm. Marcus Aurelius didn't soothe himself by thinking things would be fine. On the contrary, he reminded himself there would be deceit, ingratitude, and disappointment. But he didn't crumble because he had prepared his mind to not depend on any of it. That isn't pessimism. It's clarity rooted in reality that we don't control the current of life, but we can steer our own vessel. And to do that, you don't need a perfect routine. You just need to be truly present in those first few minutes. Waking up isn't just opening your eyes, it's reopening your direction. It's pulling back energy that wants to scatter and redirecting it to your core. Instead of asking, what's waiting for me today? Ask, what will I bring to the world today? That moment, seemingly small, is where you reset your emotional operating system for the entire day. You can't choose everything that happens, but you can choose the state in which you meet it. It's a decision no one sees, but it defines who you are. And every time you make that choice, even for a few minutes, you are quietly leading an inner revolution. We don't live better than others by what we display, but by how we control what no one sees. And there is no better time to do that than in the first moment of the day when nothing has been set. When the mind can still be directed towards stability instead of swept away by chaos. When you master that moment, you don't just master a morning. You lay the foundation for a life no longer ruled by unconscious momentum. 2. Turn pain into a furnace of will, the silent transformation. There are wounds that don't break you all at once. They're not stormy or violent. They quietly strangle something inside you until you no longer feel like yourself, yet can't quite tell who you've become. You still go to work, still smile, still move forward, but something inside has quietly died, unnoticed. That isn't your ending. It's the burial of a version of you that no longer has the strength to live truthfully. We grow up carrying a self built on expectations. Be strong. Be kind, be better than others, always appear okay. But that self, however sturdy, is just a coat, and one day, it tears when life becomes too brutal. Every blow not only takes something you love, but strips away layers you once thought essential. And when they're gone, you discover you're still here, breathing, feeling, and starting to see what you once refused to face. No one teaches us how to fall apart. We're only taught how to succeed, how to be confident, how to seem strong. So when pain arrives, we think we've failed. But in truth, it's a quiet funeral for outdated parts of the soul. Perhaps old beliefs, old relationships, or self-destructive habits, like a tree shedding old leaves to grow new ones. The death within is not a disaster, it's the condition for a more mature self to emerge. Pain is a crossing. It pushes you out of your old safety, but hasn't yet brought you to what's next. You float in a void, unsure of where to hold on. And in that moment when all labels collapse, when there's nothing left to prove or run from, you finally face the real question. If I'm no longer who I used to be, who can I become? That question is hard to answer, but it's the key to true change. Because from then on, you stop living to please your old self and start becoming someone new. Not everyone who suffers becomes wise. Some choose to blame, some choose numbness, some cover their pain with forced humor, but others choose to stop, look directly into the wound, and let it become the birthplace of something more real. That choice, silent, unseen, is what separates the wounded from the reborn. You don't have to be strong right away. You just need the courage to stop calling pain your enemy, to stop patching up the old self and let it go. Because sometimes the only thing stopping you from becoming yourself is the shadow of who you used to be. And when you're brave enough to release it, you don't become weaker. You begin to build an unshakable core. After the old shell cracks and falls away, you don't need to rush to become someone new. Some days, growth is simply sitting in the emptiness, not screaming, not demanding, not waiting to be rescued. In that nameless space, something new begins to take form, not "I've made it through," but "I am becoming." And what you're becoming often makes no sound, no recognition, no applause or fireworks, just the steady silence of someone learning to stand without being held. Resurrection isn't trying to restart your life as it was, not mending what tore, not going back to a version that was once fragile, that lived for others' approval, that thought softness was the price of being loved. Resurrection in its truest sense is stepping out of your old fog with a new posture, no longer bent by the weight of the past, no longer trembling at the door of the future. You return, not to be validated, but to prove to yourself you didn't die with what was lost. The one who once collapsed at rejection now silently smiles at loss. The one who once tied their worth to others' affection now protects their dignity, even in solitude. The one who feared abandonment now learns never to abandon themselves. And that is the new self, not stronger than others, but forged by breaking so deeply that nothing shallow can shake it again. Many think growth means forgiving, forgetting, letting go. But true resurrection doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from remembering with clarity. You still remember who hurt you, what made you cry, and the moment you almost lost yourself. But instead of living in bitterness, you live with understanding. All of it happened so I could stop living like someone who'd never known pain. You don't need revenge, don't need to run, don't need to prove you're okay. You just need to show up honestly, calmly, completely, not rushed, not forced. A resurrected self doesn't scream for attention. It radiates solidity through the absence of fear. Your silence will make those who hurt you uneasy because they can no longer control your response, and you no longer need them to change. Because once you're no longer fragile, their presence or absence no longer defines your world. At some point, you'll stop feeling the need to get over it, because every pain, every fall, every loss, you've used it as material to build yourself. There's nothing left to hide, nothing left to decorate. Just a soul that has walked through fire and no longer fears the burn. Resurrection, in the end, isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming someone even pain must bow before. 3. Letting go of control when surrender is a form of strength. We often believe that pressure comes from the outside, from work, from people, from circumstances. But if we have the courage to look inward, we'll see that most of the weight we carry doesn't come from the world. It comes from ourselves. Not from the events, but from how we try to control them in the way we want. That is the root of all distress. We want life to follow the map we've drawn in our mind, regardless of whether reality agrees or not. You want others to understand you correctly, to love you the way you need, to behave in ways you expect. You want your plans to unfold step by step. You want your emotions to remain steady, without surprises, never stepping beyond the boundaries of safety. But you forget. Life is not a program you can code. It is a river, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, always changing course, and you can't force it to flow your way by gripping the oar tighter. There is something subtle yet very real. The more you try to control, the more restless you become. The more you demand things to go according to your script, the more sensitive you become to every deviation. A wrong glance irritates you, a misplaced word enrages you, a small change throws you off, not because they're too big, but because inside you're bracing against the world, trying to impose a fabricated order that reality never promised to honor. Epictetus once warned, "You will never have peace if you wage war against things outside your control." And that is a lesson we must learn throughout life. To define the boundary between what we can influence and what we cannot. The truth is, most things in life belong to the latter. You cannot control others' attitudes. You cannot stop the rain. You cannot prevent bad news from coming. You cannot make someone love you the way you wish. And every time you try, whether through silence, expectation, or subtle manipulation, you drag your mind into a battle with no victory. You'll see, people are often exhausted not because they've done too much, but because they've thought too much about things beyond their power. You're tired, not because you've been running, but because you've been running while watching roads that aren't yours. You don't feel at peace not because life is chaotic, but because you haven't learned to let life be chaotic while keeping your inner world in order. Letting go doesn't mean being careless or irresponsible. Letting go is the clear awareness. You only need to do your part. The rest belongs to life. When you accept your limitations, you begin to meet life with a different posture, not trying to impose, but choosing to be consciously present. Not reacting out of fear, but acting from a place of inner steadiness. From that moment on, you will feel something unfamiliar. A lightness that doesn't come from life changing, but from no longer straining to hold on to what was never yours. You stop fighting the wind and start adjusting your sails. That is not surrender. It is wisdom. It's not giving up. It's liberation. We often grow up with a mistaken belief that letting go means failure. It means defeat. It's the mark of the weak. In a world that glorifies control, those who refuse to hold on are seen as powerless. But in truth, the ability to let go at the right time is the deepest expression of inner strength. Because the easiest thing is to react impulsively. The hardest is to stop, retreat inward, and decide not to let the world dictate your character. Letting go does not mean indifference. It's not the coldness of someone who doesn't care. It's the stillness of someone who sees clearly. The person who walks away from a toxic relationship doesn't do it because they no longer love, but because they've loved enough not to betray themselves. The one who stops controlling others doesn't do so out of apathy, but because they understand. Everyone has their own journey, and control kills both freedom and trust. The one who lets go of the outcome isn't lacking in motivation, but has learned to place commitment in the action, not the expectation. Rejecting control is not an easy choice. It forces you to walk past your ego, to leave behind stubborn beliefs like things must be this way, they must behave like that. Life must align with what I want. It demands a maturity big enough to understand the only thing you ever truly control is yourself, your mind, your attitude, your response. And if you spend your life trying to reshape the world to fit your design, you'll lose the shape of your own soul in the process. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought. So let it be thoughts that keep it in the light." That light doesn't come from total control. It comes from conscious surrender, a silent, unshowy kind of power. It's when you stop trying to make others love you right and start loving yourself rightly. It's when you no longer need to be understood to feel worthy. It's when you stop clinging and start being present. You cannot control the wind, but you can raise your sail. You cannot stop others from leaving, but you can remain with yourself. And you cannot control life, but you can control how you walk through it, no matter how rough the road. That is your strongest core, an unmoving center in the middle of 1,000 waves. A place within consciousness where you no longer need the world to be peaceful in order to feel peace. Letting go, ultimately, does not make you weaker. It makes you heavier with what truly matters and lighter with what never belonged to you. It's the conscious release of the superficial to preserve the essential. It's the refusal to live in the illusion of control, to live instead in truth and freedom within limits. When you can let go, you stand straighter. When you no longer force life to comply, you begin to find meaning even in what doesn't go your way. And when you no longer need control to feel safe, you've touched a form of safety that no one can take from you, security that comes from within. And that is where true power begins, not by conquering the world, but by no longer being ruled by it. 4. Gratitude as a way of living, not because everything is good, but because you've begun to see what is. Some beautiful things are still there, still quietly present in each beat of daily life, yet we no longer see them. Not because they've disappeared, but because they've become too familiar, too still, too silent, and our minds, trained to react to noise, urgency, and negativity, no longer make room for that silence. We live surrounded by things worthy of gratitude, yet our ears are tuned to judgment, our eyes fixate on what's missing, and our hearts grow weary waiting for some distant happiness, forgetting that true happiness is always here. If only we're still enough to notice. A mind left untrained will drift toward the dark. It will automatically gather what is lacking, what is imperfect, what others have that we don't. It creates an illusion of scarcity, not because we lack, but because we no longer recognize what we already have. We begin to lose touch with true beauty, constantly chasing standards set by others. And in doing so, we stop seeing the gentleness of morning light, lose the appreciation for a full meal, forget how to value the presence of someone who quietly stays by our side without needing to say a word. The good has never left you. You've just been too busy listening to criticism, chasing a recognition that's never enough, trying to please those who've never truly seen you. You've been pulled into loud headlines, dramatic content, and the noise of the world until there's no mental space left for what truly matters. Like a room overloaded with blaring speakers, the softest sound is the first to be drowned out. And, unfortunately, gratitude always speaks in a whisper. How can you feel life's warmth if your heart is too busy searching for what's wrong? How can you notice what's blooming now if your eyes are fixed on what has withered in the past or hasn't yet blossomed in the future? This lack of awareness isn't a flaw. It's the byproduct of a world obsessed with speed. But if you pause just for a moment, you'll see. So many things are quiet, unassuming, and gentle, yet they are the very foundation of a full life. No one taught us how to hear beauty in silence. No one told us that some things don't need to be better, they just need to be seen. We assume happiness must be touched, claimed, measured. But some forms of happiness, like peace of mind, an unhurried afternoon, or a silent nod from someone who cares, can only be recognized through deep presence and an awake mind. This is why those with the strongest inner lives are often the most grateful. They don't need life to be perfect to feel content. They only need their hearts to be quiet enough to hear beauty speaking softly. And once you can hear it, you'll understand. The good never left, it was you who stopped being still enough to notice. There's a common misconception about gratitude. People think it's a sugary antidote, a temporary comfort when life becomes hard. A kind of lazy optimism that says, "At least I'm luckier than someone else." But real gratitude doesn't come from comparison. It's not a shallow feeling, nor a sedative for weak souls. It is a spiritual discipline forged over time by facing raw reality while keeping the heart from hardening. A grateful person is not always cheerful. They are someone who has seen darkness, suffered loss, felt emptiness, and still chooses not to close off. They don't deny that life can be harsh. But instead of letting harshness define them, they use gratitude like a blade to sharpen the will. They know that if they spiral into blame and entitlement, even the good that remains becomes meaningless. Gratitude does not mean refusing to change. It is not resignation or compromise. On the contrary, it is the grounding force that lets us change without losing clarity. When you are grateful for what you have, you take better care of it. When you're grateful for lessons in failure, you no longer fear failing. When you're grateful for someone who once hurt you, you are no longer trapped in the role of a victim. True gratitude is an inner strength that cannot be borrowed. It arises only when you choose to live consciously instead of reacting unconsciously. Epictetus once said, "It's not things going your way that bring peace, but training your mind to see peace within things that don't." That is the essence of gratitude. You don't say thank you because life is easy, but because, in the midst of difficulty, you still find something solid to stand on. Gratitude, then, is not for the weak. It's a deliberate act of going against the instinct to complain. It's the discipline to feel enough even when things seem insufficient. It's daring to look at what's lost while still keeping light in your eyes. It's admitting there are tired days, but refusing to let that exhaustion become an excuse to hurt others. Gratitude doesn't help you escape reality. It helps you face it with calm because you're no longer letting reality distort your character. When practiced long enough, gratitude becomes a part of who you are. It makes you deeper, not because you speak well of happiness, but because you understand the value of each moment. It makes you stronger, not because you appear tough, but because you no longer feel the need to prove anything. You no longer rely on others for happiness because you've learned to nurture it from things no one can take away. Gratitude, ultimately, is a commitment to slow down, to see more deeply, and to walk with intention through the rush of life. It is the act of a steady spirit choosing to live with open eyes, an awakened heart, and a mind free from dust. 5. Inner worth. When you no longer need approval, you begin to be free. We are raised under the gaze of others. From an early age, praise becomes reward. Cold stares become punishment. Over time, no one needs to punish us anymore because we've developed an internal reward and punishment system that controls us. A right behavior brings the feeling of being loved. A thought that strays from the norm triggers guilt. And just like that, people begin to be guided not by conscience, but by the desire to be approved. Recognition is no longer a pleasant bonus. It becomes the primary fuel. Like a subtle kind of honey, it leads us to believe that being noticed equals being valuable. An article with many likes must be good. A person widely praised must be right. An applauded act must be moral. Gradually, we let the external noise shape our inner perception, and without realizing it, the gilded cage slams shut, and we no longer wish to escape. There is a brutal truth. The more beautiful something appears, the harder it is to let go. And recognition is one of the most seductive beauties. It makes us smile at the right time, nod in the right place, live as if we are constantly on stage with an audience watching every step. We strive to become likable, understandable, acceptable, and in that process, we abandon the rough edges, the unpolished truths, the unfinished parts of us that are often the most real. To be loved, we stop being true. To be accepted, we trade away our freedom. Stoicism does not promote indifference, but it opposes dependence. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for readers, he wrote them for himself, and because of that, he was free. When you write or live just to be seen, you lose the most honest part of who you are. Freedom is not doing what you like. It's having the courage to live without needing validation. Only when you stop living like an actor waiting for applause. Can you step off the stage and reclaim a real life? One that needs no spotlight, no echo, yet still holds weight. When you stop craving recognition, you'll notice a strange emptiness in your heart, an emptiness once filled by applause. At first, it may be disorienting. No more praise as reward, no more admiring glances as a measurement. But if you're brave enough not to fill that space with another substitute, you'll reach something deeper, a quiet place inside where you can finally ask without fear, what am I truly living for? True worth needs no applause because it doesn't survive on noise. It lives in the silent alignment between conscience and action, where you can walk through the world without pretending, without dodging glances, without disguising yourself just to be loved. That kind of consistency doesn't seek attention, but it carries weight. It may not make you stand out, but it makes you unshakable. Some do the right thing when being watched. Others do the right thing even when no one sees. Between those two lies a vast chasm not of morality, but of the foundation of freedom. When your actions are no longer governed by reward or punishment, you've entered the state that Epictetus calls standing firm on your own spiritual feet. That's the moment you no longer need a title because you already are someone, fully. The consistency between action and conscience is not instinctive. It is the result of silent discipline. Every time you refuse to compromise with what is wrong, every time you choose kindness even when no one notices, every time you keep a promise to yourself instead of chasing a glittering opportunity. Each of those acts is a small stone building the solid foundation of a person who cannot be moved. Seneca once said, "Live as if you are always being observed not by others, but by the best version of yourself." That quote isn't meant to pressure you, but to remind you, you always know what is right. The real question is, do you have the courage to live rightly, even when no one knows? When you're still enough to hear your inner voice and brave enough to live by it, you step into a kind of freedom that no recognition can grant and no criticism can take away. And in that moment, you understand. True worth does not need a crowd, it only needs you not to betray yourself. I used to live as if someone were watching my every step. Not God, not the law, but the crowd, the invisible stares, the voiceless standards. I worked hard, not necessarily to grow, but to avoid being left behind. I stayed silent, not necessarily out of understanding, but out of fear of being judged for saying something the crowd wouldn't like. There was a time I thought I was maturing, but I was merely getting better at pretending. Only when the quiet storm closed in, when there was no applause left, no outcome to prove anything, did I finally see what remained, a self full of fractures, never truly heard. And in that silence, I began to relearn how to live not to impress, but to live rightly. Not needing to be known, but needing to know myself. Not needing recognition, but never betraying myself. I started to rewrite every habit, every choice, every reaction like someone rebuilding a home after a storm. But this time, I didn't need anyone to stop by and admire it. You don't need the whole world to applaud to know your worth. You just need the courage to not turn away from what's right, even when it brings no immediate reward. If you've found value in this journey, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. This is not an easy path, but it's the one for those brave enough to be free from within. Be the one who keeps silent amidst the noise. The one who stands firm through changing winds. The one who lives rightly even when no one is watching. Because in the end, what remains isn't the noise but the unshakable peace within. See you in the next video.